that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others.
This is from the Creed of the Church of Scientology. Hey everybody, I'm Holly, aka the ScientoloGeek, and welcome back to the 52nd episode now for the Data series. We are going to be covering 3 policy letters today. I know it's been a while and we're on the last, 10 pages? But either way, if you like what I do, feel free to hit the like button. If not, hit dislike. I don't really care. Comment with your feedback or questions, good, bad, or sideways, and subscribe to be kept up to date on future content. Hit that notification bell, share this with your friends and your family so they can get a better understanding of what Scientology is truly all about and what their doctrine says. Without any further ado, let's get started. All right, so we are at the HCO policy letter of the 4th of January, 1979, called the Ideal Scene.
Have you realized that if you have an incorrect ideal scene, your program will be wrong? In using the data series, some evaluators tend to toss off the ideal scene as a sort of afterthought, possibly because it is part of the form of EVALS. To do so can be quite fatal to the success of the eval, and it can result in the wrong ideal scene. So always work out the ideal scene with care. That is what you're trying to achieve with your eval. Homework on the ideal scene. We know that homework may be necessary for the data section, but have you ever thought that the ideal scene may also require homework? I recall a ship's galley once that couldn't get itself unscrambled, so the cooks and stewards were sent over on a tour of a posh cruise liner. They were amazed at what a real ship's galley could look like. They'd seen an ideal scene. Until then, they didn't know why they were being harassed by the officers. They got it. If you can imagine Sitting Bull, the famous Indian war chief, trying to evaluate Queen Victoria's last grand ball failed as a situation, you would see that his eval was likely to be rejected, for he wouldn't have had a clue what the ball should have looked like. But as Sitting Bull was a pretty smart Indian,
Just say Native American. He's not from India.
if he had done his homework on the ideal scene of a Queen's grand ball, I am sure the eval would not only have passed, but the next grand ball would have been a howling success. So homework is often quite vital on the ideal scene. Not only can a person establish what an ideal scene should be, he can also establish what it could be, and that may be a long way ahead of old accepted ideal scenes. Evaling from the ideal scene. It is possible and often very necessary to, quote, evaluate backwards, that is to say, to start with the ideal scene. If you have something you want to bring about, some ideal scene you desire, and simply shuffle off toward it, don't be surprised if you never get there or achieve it. The realities and conflicts of life have a habit of intervening. What they call the vanishing illusions of youth occur simply because youth, thirsting to be a movie star or great lover or a fireman, seldom sits down and does a thorough eval first that finds the barriers that will permit a program that will work. If one sets up an ideal scene as an ambition, such as the org booming, it may just stay an ambition one remembers in his old age instead of a concrete occurrence unless one does a backwards eval on it. One does one of these backwards evals without any situation in mind. In other words, one does not have to have a sit in order to start the eval. And you are aware, of course, that most evals begin because a sit leaps up and has to be handled. So without a sit, one simply puts down the ideal scene one is hopeful of achieving. Then he finds the most glaring departure from the ideal scene. That is his sit. And he also may find as he works that he gets several sits in several versions of the principal ideal scene, which in turn become the ideal scene he had in mind in the first place. There's a simple view of it. Just set the ideal scene, find the furthest departure from it, use that as the sit, and then gathering data and doing regular eval, he will find why that ideal scene hasn't occurred or won't occur. Then he can realistically program it to handle, and the ideal scene will occur if the program is done. One can take the more complex view of it. One sets the ideal scene, finds the furthest departure from it, follows a data trail, discovers there is more than one sit, and so has a multiple sit eval, each one with a different version of the ideal scene, but these ideal scenes adding up to his original concept of the ideal scene. Let's take a simple example.
You always do take a simple example.
The major purpose of a directive to a salesman is sell the ballpark. Now, if we simply told him to do that, we would be relying on his charm and luck, and while these might be quite good, we're likely to get a failed salesman. A more sensible approach would be to convert that major purpose of the ideal scene of the ballpark sold at a profit, then find and take the widest departure from that ideal scene, which possibly is we've been trying to sell the ballpark for 2 years with no takers. Then we employ the standard steps of the data series and find the real why, which could be nobody ever compiled a list of the people who buy ballparks or approached them. And we do a program based on the why and ideal scene, and then we can give the salesman that program and that major target, and bang, we sell the ballpark at a profit.
Any person selling a ballpark usually knows who is interested in buying ballparks, usually knows the companies that purchase ballparks. This example is just a completely incompetent person, a completely incompetent salesman, which is what Hubbard makes everybody out to be.
As it could have been any one of 1,000 whys, we could have gotten 1,000 different programs, all of which would probably have failed because no evaluation was done. So, do not send to find why missions fail or projects collapse. Just notice that one didn't take what was desired and make it into an ideal scene and evaluate it backwards. To always need a catastrophic sit in order to evaluate is to ask for more and more sits to occur, as it's sort of an outpoint correct, but by evaluation. Of course, when sits exist, it's vital to evaluate them. But realize also that when you don't see what you consider an ideal scene, you can simply set it and evaluate back from it as above. And realize too, that this is a great way to make dreams come true.
Not a way to make dreams come true. This is a way to create your worst nightmare. Alright, we got the HCO policy letter of the 7th of June, 1979, revised the 14th of June, 79. So a week later, called Data Series Policy Letters Use of.
It is hereby illegal to randomly place data series policy letters on a check sheet of any kind. The data series policy letters must be studied in sequence.
HCO policy letter of the 26th of December, 1979, called Execution of Evaluations.
It's hereafter mandatory that every eval must carry in the policy section the following statement. Nothing in this eval may be interpreted to violate or alter or change HCO policy letters or HCOBs.
Again, you have to do it my way. You cannot have any kind of originality.
Anyone executing a target in this eval in such a way as to violate or alter any HCOPL or HCOB will be actionable by a committee of evidence. Any recommendation in this eval for change of policy or tech must be cleared by the Watchdog Committee, WDC, before being placed in the eval as a target, and resulting policy letter or bulletin must be reviewed by the founder personally. All data or handlings where they refer to policy or bulletins must give the policy or bulletin number and its location and text verbatim.
So I want to take a look at this. Let me take a look at the WDC sentence. Before being placed in the eval as a target, resulting policy letter or bulletin must be reviewed by the founder. So it has to be reviewed by LRH, but now that LRH is dead, I'm assuming that David Miscavige evaluates these, but I don't think anyone is violating or altering HCOPs or HCOPLs. Because I don't think he'd be willing to change anything, minus all the stuff he personally has changed.
Any violation of this policy will be actionable by ComEv. This policy is retroactive to all published evals, whether they are re-memoed or not.
Alright, so what did we cover today? We've learned that sometimes people may need to know what an ideal scene looks like before it can be reached in their own area. It's kind of sounds a bit similar to the fact that evaluators need to understand the area before being able to properly evaluate. The whole point of it is just to take a look at something that is a closer version of an ideal scene so you can get an idea of what it should look like. But when you have this, one might need to evaluate backwards. This includes starting with the ideal scene, but not having a situation in mind. From here, you find the most glaring departure from the ideal scene, and this is your new situation. So then when you're doing an eval on the situation and gathering data, you should be able to find the why and handle the situation. More than one situation might pop up, and this can help someone reach a better ideal scene. We learned that data series policy letters cannot be randomly placed on check sheets and must be studied in sequence. We learned that executing targets in an eval that violates or alters policy or bulletins will be subject to a committee of evidence. We've learned that recommendations for change of policy and tech need to be cleared by WDC and reviewed by the founder, LRH, who's dead, so I'm assuming David Miscavige, but I don't think he was even doing that. So I don't know if this policy is still active to begin with. I would have to get more info on this if I was going to properly tell you if this is what's still done. Anyway, if you guys want access to any of this documentation, the bulletins, the policies, the flag orders, base orders, any of the miscellaneous stuff that I have in my Google Drive folder, feel free to email me at scientologeek@gmail.com, or you can go to the Discord server, link in the description below, and then send me a DM from there with a valid Gmail address. I will talk to all of you later. See ya.